Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Positive Discipline TV. This is our new monthly show that we are creating in partnership between Sproutable and Positive Discipline. And it is designed to highlight the voices, the wisdom, and the diversity of positive discipline parent educators across the globe, and to offer this up directly to the parents that we serve. As trainers and coaches, we know that this work is powerful and messy, messy. And with PDTV, we're hoping to bring the practice of positive discipline to life for all of you and to leave you feeling empowered and encouraged to carry it on inside of your own families. So I'm Casey O'Rourke. I'm a positive discipline trainer and coach and the adolescent lead at Sproutable. My co-host is Julietta Skoog. Hi, Jules. And she is also a positive discipline trainer and the early years maven at Sproutable. Each month we'll bring a different guest on to discuss how they're integrating positive discipline into the communities that they serve. And we're really excited about our first guest. So Jules, take it away.
We could not be more thrilled to be in conversation today with the Dr. Jane Nelsen. She is the author of the Positive Discipline series and co-founder of a worldwide movement through the Positive Discipline Association that has certified thousands of positive discipline facilitators in over 80 countries. The original Positive Discipline book, written in 1981, was the product of Jane's deep gratitude for the changes she was able to make as a parent of 7 children after learning the work of Alfred Adler and Rudolf Dreikurs in her college class in child development and family relations. Since that time, Jane has authored or co-authored many books, tool cards, and several training manuals. Couples and business leaders continue to grow, and there has been the interest on the many parts of parents and teachers who have experienced stronger relationships as a result of training in positive discipline. And I can add myself to that list as well. It's truly been an incredible life change. It's been a life change. My gratitude is just like overflowing. So thank you, Jane, for being with us here today. And we would love if you would just kick us off by telling us more about the birth of positive discipline.
Well, it came from my own feelings of failure and inadequacy as a parent. I was one of those who would punish until I didn't like myself, and then I would be permissive till I didn't like my kids. So I finally decided to go to a college class on child development, and I was so lucky because my professor said, we're not going to teach you a bunch of theories, we're going to teach you one theory and how to apply it so that children learn self-discipline, responsibility, cooperation, all those good things we want. And it was the philosophy of Adler and Dreikurs and practical application of how to use that with their kids. But I have to tell you that I was what I now call an obnoxious learner. And what I mean by that, I would yes, but, and what if, and I was punished and I turned out fine. Have you ever heard that one?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But as I would practice these things, they were so effective. And if they weren't, I could go back and learn why, the mistake that I had made. And so I now have what I call my before, during, and after children, the ones that were raised before I ever learned about this, and then the 3 that while I was learning, the 2 that came after. And it's I'm still learning.
Yeah, I think we can all really, I'm so grateful that you said, I was just feeling ineffective. Like I just felt so discouraged myself as a parent, that to go and seek that other information. I love that you call yourself an obnoxious learner, that, yeah, but all the time. Yeah, but what, I turned out okay, or yeah, but what about when this happens? And especially given how many children you do have, you can say, well, this works for one or it doesn't. And being able to come back to that one theory as that anchor is so profound, I think, in that way, to just say, this is actually the grounding, this is the foundation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jane, I like to think of positive discipline as, so much bigger than a parenting philosophy or a parenting program. It's really a lifestyle and a way of moving through the world in relationship with others. And you've been in this practice of this lifestyle for a long time. I would love to know, where are the places that you're still feeling challenged to be walking the talk of positive discipline?
Do you know that one of the things that Rudolf Dreikers gave me, the lecture over and over, called The Courage to Be Imperfect. And he just kept giving it because he realized it just seems to be that most of us have this tape about, even though we say in positive discipline, mistakes are wonderful opportunities to learn, it's easy to say that. But when we make these mistakes, we just have these tendencies to feel, oh, I knew I wasn't really good enough, or I'm a phony, I should just call back all my books. Or we just really do beat up on ourselves. But I am so grateful for that philosophy, because, one of the things I have found is that actually, when I make the mistakes and then we go back and fix it with our kids, it's better than if we hadn't made the mistake in the first place, because we really are teaching them. And, I just love it that my little grandkids say, made a mistake, it's okay to make mistakes, so, but still, it's easier sometimes said than done. It's a lifelong process.
Yeah. I have to tell you a story. So a story that I really appreciate that you share, I believe it's in the Positive Discipline, just the basic book, basic, not so basic.
The first.
The original.
Where you and Mary kind of get into it, your daughter Mary, and she takes the Positive Discipline book and highlights all the places that she thinks you're getting it wrong and kind of throws it back at you, right? So
she even said I'm going to tell Oprah.
were you like, please tell Oprah? I'd love to talk to Oprah.
You did.
Well, I had a hilarious situation happen recently. So for those of you that are watching and don't know, I do put out a podcast, and my daughter is actually the person who listens to the podcast and writes all of my show notes. And the other night we were getting into it. It was mostly friendly banter, but there was a little bit of underlying, elbowing, we'll say. And she looked at me and she said, you know what? I'm going to start my own podcast and I'm going to discredit everything you say.
Ouch.
And it just was so funny. And it reminded me of that story that you share so candidly in the book, just about, being with the pushback sometimes that happens with our kids. And because I think when we are choosing into positive discipline and this relational way of being with our families, sometimes it feels like our kids, it's like, God, it would be easier if you just yelled at me and walked away. Right. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it would probably be easier for me too. But that's not what we're choosing into. Can you talk a little bit more just about navigating that pushback from our kids?
Well, I think that, this whole idea that punishment does seem easier because it does seem to get immediate results, but it doesn't get the long-term results. And that's what we really always take a look at it. And I love it why we always do the 2 lists of the challenges we have and what we hope for them, the characteristics and life skills, and just have to keep remembering that and apologize. The one thing I got really good at was the 3 hours or 4 hours. Sometimes we say 3 hours, sometimes we say 4 hours of recovery, where we just have to sometimes apologize to our children. But the one of the things I love is that Mary recently told me that she says, I didn't realize you were doing positive discipline. I thought everybody parented this way until she got out and had roommates who were so irresponsible and so inconsiderate that she started having family meetings with her roommates. So I think that sometimes you just have to, and I know that for me, I think that children the fighting goes down at least 80% when you have regular family meetings. And then because things were going so smooth, I remember one time we quit having them and then the fighting increased. And so just, okay, we got to go back and do it regularly. It's just the ups and downs of life that we have to get used to. And I'm not sure some of my children have ever forgiven me. So.
Well, I would, Casey asked about just the pushback with kids, and I'm curious with, as positive discipline trainers and all of the parent educators that you've trained, throughout the years and all over the country, all over the world, the pushback often that we get from those other parents in the class about, yeah, but just like kind of the obnoxious learners, that not your phrase, but the curious, that piece of like, yeah, but it would be easier if I just took the iPad away, or yeah, but what happens when they've just, done this really extreme behavior and then we're supposed to, just let them get away with it. I think there is this misnomer that positive discipline is permissive or that it's about being nice. And I think that the piece around the teaching and the firmness is really what I think is so nuanced, not necessarily nuanced, but also what's so beautiful about your books, because you really draw that out. Like, what does firmness look like? So I'm wondering too, just about the pushback that you've had through the years with other parents that are saying, yeah, but this is, would just be easier this other way.
Well, first of all, I used to try and argue with them, but I gave that up. I finally decided that it is not my job to teach anyone who doesn't want to learn. And so I could just say, this is isn't the only way. And if you might stick around, and if you take what you agree with, and don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, that little poster we have in one of our facilitator manuals. But one of the things I'm sure you guys have experienced is that people who do stick around, sometimes those who are the most obnoxious at the end are sharing how much they've learned. And the other thing is, what I also learned is that when they're being obnoxious, all the other people are really on your side. Usually they see that they're being obnoxious, and they start, they're learning a lot from that about what not to do. But the other thing I want to mention, of course, are experiential activities. Nothing works better than for them to participate in experiential activities where they become the child who experiences what we're doing. And then when we go back to the two lists and say, are you learning any of these characteristics and life skills that you want? And they say no. And so that's another reason I think why it's become relatively popular in many countries, because even though we have cultural differences, and we all seem to feel the same when it comes to our children. We all want the same for our children. That's why the two lists are always the same in every country.
Well, and just talking about the birth of positive discipline, how was the birth of some of these activities? Because they are really so profound, how did those come about?
Well, Lynn and I both went to a workshop with John Taylor. He's an Adlerian, and who had worked with, oh my gosh, the very famous psychologist, I can't remember her name right now, but it'll come to me later, but maybe. But we were just so impressed with how much more we learned from, he did the Competent Giant. Anybody who doesn't know about that, where the adults stand on chairs and scold children. And so it was just so profound, the learning for us, that Lynn started writing activities like crazy. And I thought, I could never do that. But now I write them like crazy. It's like whenever there's a problem, how can I figure out an activity? Because they are so much more powerful than any lecture you can ever give. And that makes it so much more fun. And see, then also in every country, they're experiencing it in their own language, in their own bodies, and they express what they've learned in their own language. So nothing like experiential, like being the child.
I love that. And when I just listening to you speak into that, it's like the opportunity to support people and myself in feeling it in my heart and in my body versus, the consumption of reading a blog or listening to a podcast, that which is all great and reinforcing, but to really enact a change in our own behavior requires that full body experience. And that's something that I love that that's how we're trained to facilitate this work, and to really trust that the experience that the parent has through the activity is going to be ever more profound than me just talking at them. And I like to talk. I'm happy to talk at people.
That's right. Well, and just,
That'd be
it's
cool.
easier, right? Isn't it easier, Casey, for us to just tell parents what to do? But I do think the aha that I see time and time again is when they role play or experience it as their child. So many parents have said, I never thought about it from their perspective. And that whole part of positive discipline that's drawn from the Adlerian theory of getting into their world, their belief behind the behavior, you know, their perspective, how are they seeing this? Like that competent giant, you know, of just being that just physical experience of looking up at the grown-up is really, I mean, it's amazing. It's profound, really. It's profound, Jane, this work.
Well, and the other thing is that Dreiker said, just go teach what you know, even if you only know just a little bit more. And so when we've done that, Lynn and I thought, okay, we're going to do these we're going to teach other people how to go teach. And I think that that's what has also helped it spread, to say you don't have to be perfect to teach it. In fact, you will learn more. You know, sometimes I would get so tired though of hearing myself talk, same thing over and over. Then someone would come up to me and say, you've changed my life. And now whenever I go around and ask all the parent educators and trainers, how many of you have heard people tell you that you've changed their life? You guys, Julietta and Casey, how many of you have you heard?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like addicting. Like I'm like, oh, I mean, that's what's like everything. I mean, that's what, because sometimes I feel the same way. Sometimes I'm like, once again, I'm like on that same circuit with my, you know, just in the past, like my flip chart, and I'm saying the same things and telling the stories. And then it's like, why am I doing this? You know, I'm putting myself out there. I feel like I'm so vulnerable. You know, I'm telling these crazy stories about my own kids and my own parenting fails. Like, why am I doing this to myself? And then you get those moments every time where the parent's like, this was incredible. You literally changed my life. Or, I mean, and to think, I think about, especially because my focus is on the really little children and the young kids. And when they say, you know, I stopped doing timeouts, I stopped spanking my kids, I stopped shaming them or screaming at them. And I think about those little human beings, you know, that has changed the trajectory of their future too, not just changed the life of this parent, but the trajectory of the kids. So yeah, that's definitely what keeps it going. And I think, you know, your point, Jane, about, you know, the experience being in 80 countries, often I come back to myself too, as a, you know, trainer, as a teacher. And I think to myself, just trust the process, like trust the activity, you know, trust the process. It's not about what I know or my advice or my own 3 kids, but really trusting those activities, trusting the way that you taught us, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. I also feel like, you know, on the other end of the spectrum, where I'm working mostly with parents of adolescents, it's a similar, you know, it is that I feel like, having been trained to facilitate, there has also been this permission to model the messiness, to model the courage to be imperfect, to model trusting the process. And I'm really grateful to my children every time they give me permission to share, because what I have found with parents of adolescents is, you know, it feels like the resources for parenting really fall heavy on those early years. And there is a sense, once we get to adolescence, if we've been kind of cruising and things have been pretty good, and then it gets really hard, it feels like, oh, shoot, you know, the window is closed. And so I really appreciate how relationship-centered positive discipline is. And what I'm hearing from parents is, you know, I didn't realize that I could, that how the power of relationship and shifting my, you know, where I'm focusing my attention and where I'm focusing my time with my adolescent, and how, you know, we talk about the iceberg metaphor, how powerful it is in influencing behavior when the focus is on relationship all throughout childhood, right? But especially in the adolescent years, as we're navigating both that setting limits while letting go. And it can feel just so messy in my own life, as well as in the lives of the parents that I serve. There is a question in the chat that I would love to ask you, Jane. Catherine asked, how did positive discipline change your relationship with your before children?
Well, frankly, it saved it. But let me just tell you, my oldest child left home at 14. This was before my oldest child. And one of the reasons is because he was growing pot in the sandbox out in the, I kept wondering, why is he paying so much attention to the sandbox? When I told him, I said, you can't do that. And he said, well, then I'm leaving. And, but it's like, it was a very strained relationship. And then later, because when I started doing positive discipline, even just talking to him on the phone, and it was like, even when he was in his 30s, he says, you know, Mom, you're one of my best friends. And he said, no, you're my best friend. And that was even after we were just, I hate to think what our relationship would be like today if I had been still doing that old stuff, rather than being able to change even after he had run away from home. So, you know, the one thing I would really like to talk just a little bit about is how it's, I'm starting to call it in-between parenting, you know, because when we say both, it's not punitive and it's not permissive. And it's so hard for people to understand, well, what could be in between? You know, what does kind and firm really mean? And especially when so often being kind can be permissive, and then the long-term results is not kind, the long-term results. And even though punishment seems to work, what are the long-term results? And also the people, excuse me, don't understand that, excuse me, that firm does not mean to be mean. Mm-hmm. You know, to say, I love you, and the answer is no. Or I know you don't want to do your homework and it's time for homework, or what was our agreement? Of course, that agreement part is really important, but being firm, it can be the kindest thing you can do to help them learn to feel responsible and capable. So, but they need to help. And that's why, you know, in positive discipline, we have so many tools. And I just love it that when they say, well, what does that mean? And we have a whole deck of tool cards for, okay, try this, or, you know, and when you were mentioning that it was working in all the relationships, like in businesses and marriages, I think we need a deck of tool cards for politicians, don't you?
I have to tell just a quick funny story about the tool cards because I love them so much. I have them on my desk constantly. We share them, you know, with all of our classes, and there's an app also for the tool cards. And if you shake your phone, it sort of shuffles the deck. And years ago, and my first two were so colicky, of course, got 2 in a row colicky babies. And I had found myself in a place where I really should not have been. I was invited. They said no babies. Then they sort of said, oh, but you can bring I really didn't want to be. Anyway, I have this crying, screaming baby. And in the moment, I'm just like sweating. I'm holding back tears. I just want to, fight or flight is like happening. I want to just eject from this little wedding shower that I was at. And I kept bringing my baby back, in this other room, trying to soothe her, and it wasn't happening. I finally I panicked, and I picked up my phone and I opened up the Positive Discipline app and I shook it, and the tool card popped up, mistakes or opportunities to learn. And I thought, oh my gosh, everything relaxed for me. It was like, oh my gosh, of course. And I walked out, I packed up my baby. I walked out and I said, I am so sorry. It was such a mistake for me to bring her here. I cannot wait to see you at the wedding. Thank you. Hugged them and just walked out with my head held high and then burst into tears. But the tool cards there's so many positive discipline tools to help us with everything. You know, it's like in life, really, not just with our children, but it's just really a way of being. So yeah, love those tool cards.
Well, and I love the concept of mistakes being opportunities to learn, because I just had that experience. I could hear some chatting on the Zoom, and I know that I can mute everybody. And so I muted everybody, including you, Julietta. So apologies
and
for that.
Me.
And you, James. Sorry.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Oh, the Zoom.
You know, I just want to say, and speaking of tools, we now have these new, so I've got them all on a ring, but we now have these new tools for kids that we'll be soon having a guidebook with. So they are life principles. They are just principles that show dignity and respect for everyone.
And I think,
but specific ways to do that.
and what I think is also unique about positive discipline, also than some, they're just parenting books in general, is that you have that school component. There is really in the classroom component, and it's for teachers. It's really for all people who are working with children. And so these new tool cards, as a school psychologist, school counselor who was in the schools for over 15 years, going in and trying to do these guidance, lessons, those tool cards are literally brilliant for children. I mean, each one is its own little mini lesson to teach young children, older children. I mean, they're so relevant. So I could not be thrilled. I'm always amazed at the next book that you have and the next set of tool cards. I'm like, how does she keep doing it? It's incredible.
Hey, and Brad, will you drop the link in the chat where people can find the tool cards? Because I know you're on the call too, as well. There's another question in the chat. Can we grab it?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. What do you do? This is the burning question that everybody always has, right? What do you do when you're being firm and they still won't cooperate? How do you answer that question when you're working with parents, Jane?
Oh gosh, you know what? This reminds me of one of my favorite new activities called tools or tricks. And because someone said, well, I think that these tools are just tricks to make kids do what you want. And I can almost guarantee you, if you use a tool and it doesn't work, you're using it as a trick, not as a real tool. And, in the activity, what we have people do is show some of the basic concepts of positive discipline and just have them look and say, okay, as you look at this list, and I'll just read some of them to you, what might have been missing from what you did? And it's like, were you focusing on solutions? Did you validate their feelings first? Did you take time for training? Were you both kind and firm? Are you having regular family meetings where they get a voice? Did you deal with the belief behind the behavior? Did you make a connection before the correction? Did you ask curiosity questions? Did you have special time? There's just all of these things and that's what I learned in my class a long time ago, that when something didn't work, I would go back and I would learn the piece that was missing. But also, I think it's really important to point out that this does not mean that you're going to be perfect, and it does not mean your children are going to be perfect. And I worry about kids who don't rebel because that's, we say, how do you spell individuation? R-E-B-E-L. And kids are always trying to find out where they have power. And so I just think that okay, if I was firm, I might have just been expecting them to obey without any involvement on their part, like saying, gee, we're having a problem here. What ideas do you have that would solve this? Could we put it on the class meeting or family meeting agenda and talk about it later to do what's respectful for both of us? So yeah, it's not perfect, and we're not.
And what I hear you saying, Jane, too, is that the firmness is not just about, I think there's this implication like I'm being firm, and really that it's just in my voice and doing this, but firmness actually is the systems. It's the rules, it's the expectations, it's the systems that we have in our family, it's the family meetings, it's what was our agreement, it's what's on our routine chart, it's the contributions, it's, the way, even the agreement like we have in our house about the way that we greet each other in the morning. We had to practice that, right. So, it's everything. It's not just the way that we show up in this like mean way, it's everything.
Well, and I love thinking about expectations too, and expectations also being, guess what we do in our family? We problem solve. We talk about hard things. We come together in mutual respect and puzzle things out. Like that as an expectation, I think is really powerful as well. And I want to make sure everybody who's watching teenagers and tweens heard Jane say that she is worried about the kids that don't rebel. Okay. I just wanted to say that one more time for all the parents of adolescents in the house.
Well, and
also,
go ahead.
I just really want to point out that we need to consider the mistaken goals. And, when for people who might not know what the iceberg analogy is, there's the behavior at the tip and the beliefs behind. And to me, if I was firm and a child didn't, quote, obey or do what they're supposed to, that would be my clue that we're in a power struggle.
Mhm.
And I would have to ask myself, what am I doing to create this power struggle? And did I not get the child involved, or was I, anyway, there's just that, this is why you always have to take a look at it. It's just not a simple bag of tricks. They are really tools that you have to understand, and that take some training and background.
Yeah, and I think that's the other really unique thing about positive discipline as well, because it draws from the Adlerian theory and using the mistaken goal chart, which is so also profound. That's the shift. That's not just this manipulative surface trick, that it to go deeper underneath and say, wow, what is their perspective? Where are they coming from? How am I? Because the clue of how I'm feeling in this, that allows you to see it through their eyes. It really is sort of like Jedi mind, like,
I want to give a really interesting example that, how we do the parents helping parents problem solving steps, and the teachers helping teachers problem solving, this whole process where we role play what's going on, what the problem is, and everybody's part. And this one teacher just could not figure out why this little boy, I think he was like a third grader, had just become so hurtful, because they had been personal friends in their families. And she just couldn't understand why he was just being so hurtful. He felt hurt because she went on vacation. And, sometimes these things that are going on in their minds don't make any sense to us until we really, that's why the problem solving steps can really help us see all the pieces that are going on, to help us understand the belief behind the behavior as well. And that a misbehaving child is a discouraged child. And we just, the discouragement may not make sense to us, but still there's some discouragement there.
Yeah. And just because it doesn't make sense to us doesn't necessarily mean that it's not valid or rational or any of the other things. So Marcelie in the chat said, I've heard Jane say that behavior change is not actually the goal. The real goal is to create an encouraging relationship and environment to increase the odds of pro-social behavior. Do you still agree? Do you still stand by that, Jane?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's not an incident, one time of, okay, you did what I said and why didn't it work? It is this whole, like, I love that when Mary went away and said, I didn't even realize you were doing positive discipline. It was just a whole way of life that she thought everybody did. Oh, did I tell you about the time when she finally became a teenager and started complaining about family meetings? And that was the one thing I would insist, no, we have to do family meetings. We can make them shorter, but they're important to me. And then she goes and stays overnight with the family and comes back the next day and says, that family is so messed up. They should be having family meetings. It's like, so.
Well, and I appreciate, Marcelie, it's such a beautiful, offering. Thank you for this. And I'm curious too, with working with so many parents of young children, this idea that, you're worried, like when adolescents don't rebel, or it should be messy, all of these opportunities, this way of life. And I think for the parents of the young kids, there is such a relentlessness of the challenges, just constantly, that they don't ever feel, or they often feel like they don't have many wins, or how do what do you say to the parents that to know when they're feeling like this is effective, like it is working, or what does success kind of mean at this age? Because you're not seeing those results right away.
Well, for me, one of the biggest things that I loved is that I enjoyed parenting more doing this way. So if I'm not feeling good about feeling, okay, I did that because I felt guilty, or I did that because I was angry or didn't know what else to do, I just have to calm down and then go back to knowing that it feels good to me. And it doesn't mean that my children are going to be perfect. I have to keep remembering that. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to be perfect. But overall picture, it's my daughter who, and I know that one of the questions is, I had two of my children who even got into drugs. And boy, that's challenging, And yet later, in her 40s, apologized and felt so much better and feels so much closer. So it's a lifelong process too. And people are all on their own journeys, and we just do the best we can.
I just have to restate that. I just think that's so powerful. I feel emotional right now because I just want to restate that it is about how we feel. It's not about this change in the behavior and that we have these perfect little obedient kids. It's how are we feeling? You know, do we feel like we showed up in a way that we feel connected, that we stood by our own, we feel respect, you know, for ourselves, that we feel like we came in from a place of encouragement and connection and firmness too. And whether or not it works, we're able to lay our head on the pillow at night and feel good. And we're going to try again the next day, you know, and that it really is a practice. So I really appreciate you saying that, Jane. Thank you.
And I think that sometimes we just have to respect that children are on their own journey and they have to learn their own life lessons, and that we can just be as supportive as we can. And sometimes we have to get help. Sometimes we have to get professional help.
Yeah, I feel like I have had a crash course in that in the last 3 or 4 years. Like, oh, right, this is not my journey. This is your journey. And I get to be a part of it on the side. On the side. But I also really want to say, you know, that just like you were talking about, Julietta, with the younger kids and that feeling of it takes a while to see the results of how we're showing up, you know, that it looks similar in the adolescent years because, and there's this kind of sense of time is running out. Right? We only have, they're going to be on their own, hopefully soon. And what I'm hearing you speak into, Jane, which I think is so important to remember, is 18 and, you know, launch, whenever that happens, launching and leaving home is not the end of our relationships with our kids. And in fact, we're still in the beginning. Like, this is just the beginning of our relationship with our kids, and to parent in a way that results in relation. I mean, I talk to so many parents who don't have good relationships with their own parents. And, you know, it's such a beautiful thing when we hold that as, you know, an end goal or an ongoing goal is just around wanting young adults and, you know, 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds who still want to spend time with us and come to us and want to hear from us. I think that is so profound. And yeah, and I was talking to a client recently about, you know, just issues that her teenager had. And we were talking about, you know, we can provide all of we can provide the environment, we can get that outside help and those resources. And the hard part is remembering it's actually up to our children to be willing to do the work inside of those resources and inside of that environment. And that is not something that we can control. And maybe it happens while they're still under our roofs, or maybe it's going to be life that really propels them into stepping into that willingness to do their own work around, you know, evolving as human beings. But
now, one of the things that Stephen Glenn used to say is, if you teach your children to be independent, don't be surprised if they learn to be independent, you know, of you. So.
Yeah.
Can I ask a personal question, Jean? You know, I think about the way you must have been raised in a really different way because you created positive discipline. There was no positive discipline before that. And I'm just wondering, like, how did you do it? How did you, or I mean, I'm making an assumption, you know, of the way that you were raised. And we've had some conversations too, just, you know, personally too, just of that. But how, you know, having your own children, you already had two, I just imagine you like going and getting your doctorate, like authoring these books, just sort of, it just seems so radical. Like, what was it? Like, what was it in you that really made such this change, or was it so different the way that you were raised? Like
desperation. That's why I just had to start finding answers. But, you know, because when I was raised, it was really more like free range parenting. I mean, you remember, I'm 84 years old. This is a long time ago, where we lived in a neighborhood where we could stay out all night, not all night, but the kids were out on the streets playing games, run sheepy run and kick the can. Kids haven't even heard of no TV. You know, we could walk downtown to the movies. It wasn't scary. And so half the time my parents didn't even know where I was, and they weren't worried because they knew there were neighbors. In those days, the neighbors could tell on you, and your parents would take their side. So it was just, and there was no pressure to parents didn't get involved in their homework. It's like if you didn't want to go to college, oh well, it's like it's totally different time. And so, boy, I even remember when I was a teenager when TV came. Anyway, it's different. It's very different. And, I just think that this idea of we have to keep getting, the reason I love family meetings is when they're done correctly. And by the way, family meetings can totally fail if parents just use that as another platform for trying to get there to lecture and talk instead of getting kids involved.
I had to learn that through experience, by the way.
Right. Yeah, somebody told me their family meeting wasn't working. I said, either they're too long or you're talking too much. So this is anyway why I really needed help, because I didn't know, that, like I said, and a lot of all people know is either permissiveness or punishment. They just don't know what else there is, and they're afraid that if you don't do one, you're going to get the other. And so, I love calling it in between parenting. It's in between being punishment or when you tell people no punishment and you tell them no permissiveness, what else is there? They don't know. And
well, you're just such a beautiful model for that, to just say, like, you know what, I was raised totally differently, and I can't, like, out of desperation, like, I am going to do things in a different way, and I can do that. Such that radical approach. And I think that's so helpful for so many families that turn to your books and turn to the classes, in that same way, to say there is another way,
And, I really loved the book Children the Challenge by Rudolph Dreikurs. It was life-changing, and it seemed like there was not enough of what to do's. There was you've got what not to do. And so that has been the point of positive discipline. I want to know, okay, when you say kind and firm, what does that mean? And with lots of examples of what that means. And that's why we have so many tools. When you say no punishment, no rewards, and they say, what else is there? And we can say, well, we got a whole bunch of what else is. I love that tool right after they've done their challenges, to choose one and then just randomly pick a tool and see. It's amazing how often they get the perfect one that would deal with the challenge that they're having. And if not, they can pick another one, because one of them will eventually come up that will really be helpful.
Can I pull in some more from the chat? Does that sound okay from you,
Yeah, that
ladies?
sounds great.
So
yeah.
Early on, somebody asked about how to, and when one parent is really committed to this practice, and then the other parent is more reluctant. And then we just got another comment around April talks about she and her husband being very committed to positive discipline and have signed up for a class through Sproutable. Well done, April. And they both have parents, their own parents, who see out of a very different lens. Mm-hmm. And so she's curious, how do we handle the haters? How do we handle the opinions of others who just don't really see or understand this philosophy of being with our kids?
Well, first, let me talk about the husband and wife maybe not agreeing.
Okay.
I think that short of abuse, you just allow your spouse to do what they do and you do what they do. And kids are so clever, they know how to change their behavior depending on who they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's abuse, there's another matter. But it was really funny because when I married Barry 50 years ago, and by the way, I'm so imperfect. I've been married 3 times, so I learned from mistakes, life. But he believed in spanking. But and I didn't ever argue with him, but I don't think he ever did. But he would watch what I was doing without me telling him he should do it. And eventually I heard him talking to people, his friends on the phone, telling them about it. So, but the main thing is if I wish more of would go to classes together, And which, by the way, I think we should just go there right away. One of the things about the positive discipline community is that there are so many of us now. There are so many classes. You know, you have your podcast, love the Joyful Courage podcast and the Be Sproutable tapes with real kids, those videos with real kids. And they can also go to positivediscipline.org and find all the classes, because I think that to have that reminder over and over, I had to keep going to classes, and every time I taught a class, I learned more than anybody else.
Mhm.
So if you really want to learn it, go teach it, you know, and just tell people, you know, I'm not told, I don't even want to be the expert. I want to help you learn to be an expert in your own life. And so I teach it because I want to learn it better. So I don't know if I even answered the question. I don't know if I even remember what the question was.
Do you have any good, well, I know this, well, maybe, and Julietta, maybe you have a good answer for this. Like, what are some good one-liners? Like when people, you know, I mean, we've all had that experience where our kids are doing their thing and we're responding in a way that feels right and good to us, the positive discipline way. And then someone's like, oh yeah, let's see how that turns out. Or, you know, some other not so great, supportive, unsupportive comment. Do you have any good one-liners? No, other than swearing at them. Sorry, that would be
everybody gets to choose their own path.
Yeah, I think for me too, it's in my own, the one-liner is in my own head, which is that this is about me and my kid. You know, it's actually my relationship with them is the most important. So it's in that moment, I mean, but I also one time like whisper, I think Leona was 2 and I could just see she was about to throw like in a massive fit. This was obviously pre-pandemic. We're in like a pizza party, you know, post soccer. And the pizza had fallen on the floor and she was just so upset because she wanted this pizza. And I just whispered in her ear, here's the thing, you are not going to eat that piece of pizza because it is disgusting. It's on the floor, but I'm going to reach up and I'm going to pick this other piece of pizza and I'm going to hand it to you and you're going to eat it. And I didn't say it in front of, and you know, I just whispered it and she just paused and I handed her the piece of pizza and she walked along and all the other parents were like, what did you say to her? You know? So I think sometimes it's also keeping it more private. Like it's not this big public response when they're, you know, it's also removing myself or the audience to just, that even answers it too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So maybe you should ask people to put one-liners in the chat if they have any.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Anybody?
Well, Jane, you were asking, I mean, the question that Casey had asked also about like what to do when there's 2 partners that are different, and your answer of just like stay in your own lane, like by modeling, they'll show up. And I think that also speaks to April's question of like, you know, me and my partner are taking this class, but we have these grandparents that might do it in a different way as well. And that's the same response.
Well, and when I quit arguing with people, trying to teach them, I just really like this, and everybody has to choose what's right for them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Casey, you want to pick a couple of other questions? Is this a good format as we're?
Well, I'm also looking at, well, this is a great question from Alana, maybe. I don't know how many Alanas we still have on the call.
The fact that we are able to clone her, though, is pretty amazing right now because she is the most incredible human being. And we can just do a shout out for Alana at Sproutable, our fearless leader at Sproutable.
So she wrote, Jane, you have accomplished so much and served so many people over the years. Is there anything left you still wish to do in your work and see happen?
Well, yes, I would love to still teach more people how to be coaches in parenting, you know, but I think the whole idea is I just love the legacy of having people teach more people, you know, our certification programs. And, you know, so many people who take that just find out how they just love it. It's one that they say that's the best training. At first, when they find out they're going to have to role play, there's this, but then later people say, oh, this kind of learning has spoiled me. Now it's so hard for me to go listen to a lecture. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's in good hands, which is thousands. We have thousands of trainers out there now. I think we had 10,000 in China alone.
My gosh.
At one time. So that just feels so good.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. Your work has gone global, Jane. I mean, did you see that coming?
Absolutely not. I remember in one of our board meetings years and years ago, and I even remember Jane Reed Palmer saying, someday this is going to be another country. Like, oh, no, it's not. So yeah, I'm totally shocked. In fact, I have a list of everyone who's taken the training online, not the DVD training or whatever, self-study, 88 countries. I've listed them all. Every time we got an answer sheet from somebody who took that training, and they've all just said it just was one of the best things. So,
wow, that's pretty amazing. One more question, and this came up a couple times, and it has to do with family meetings. So we're going to go into one of our favorite tools, family meetings. So somebody asked, I am wondering, so is Jill, I'm wondering what I can do when my kids only fool around and aren't being serious about compliments during family meetings or won't engage in problem solving.
Do you know that my answer to most of those kind of questions are ask the kids?
Mm-hmm.
When I was an elementary school counselor and the teachers would come to me and say, what do I do about this? I said, oh no, put it on the agenda and ask the kids.
Yeah.
So I would, even with that, I'd say, we're not taking our compliments seriously. I'd like your help. How can we solve this problem? What are your ideas for what to do?
Yeah. I love that our kids, even the family meetings themselves, offer up agenda items for the family meetings.
Well, and I think that point too, Jane, when you talk about the experience, within the positive discipline classes, one of the parts of the activity as we're talking about family meetings is you have us ask, what do kids learn from family meetings? And that list of all the things that they learn are so aligned with the life skills list ultimately.
Right.
And so even when there's this discord or I don't want to, or, that learning process, they're practicing skills just by being in the same room and getting messy and, fool around. And you get all of that practice too of just showing up. Yeah.
Well, right. And see, to me, class meetings is just one of the best social learning where they're solving problems. It's where they're being kind to everybody. They're inclusive. I just love the class meetings, and think, especially if they're done every day. And in family meetings, of course, once a week. But I again, don't ever expect them to be perfect. It's like, I know that the Adlerians, a bunch of Adlerians years ago, wanted to see if they could find the perfect family meeting. And so they had people recording their meetings, and then they finally gave up, said there's no such thing. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just helps for it to be consistent.
I love that. That's so powerful.
And the thing is that during the family meetings and that's where kids are learning all the other tools.
Yeah.
And then, but they have to have some of the tools to make them successful. So
Jules, do you want to ask any of your quick questions that we have planned?
I think, just maybe one of the final questions of just if there was one, for any parent that's coming in to it new, no matter what the age, if all parents would just do this one thing to start, what's a window, what's a way in, do you feel like, for that first step to take? There's so much of positive discipline. What's one step that they can take forward on their positive discipline journey?
I can't say that there's one step.
I know, not a fair question, right? The first step.
No, because I think I just think it takes a path, that there are many steps to the destination. Mm-hmm. And if people just try to do one thing, they might be really frustrated because it don't work, because there's a combination of so many things to make it work. And that's why when I would say if something didn't work, I'd have to go find out what was missing.
That's right. Well, and I think more of like that first step toward, for everything that kind of, and I think, even your comment about being kind of that in between parenting, like just even taking a step towards that space.
Well, to me, it's to find a community. That's what I think. It's like, there's so many classes, and now even online. And I did see in the chat that somebody's concerned that now they have to do it online. what I just loved is that when the pandemic first started, a bunch of our trainers just got busy and figured out how to teach these activities, these experiential activities online. And for people who join the Positive Discipline Association, they can go online and find examples of people we've taped some of these, doing these classes online. And we've even written the activities and revised them so you can teach them online. Mm-hmm. And so, to find that support.
I think that's brilliant.
Taking a class or teaching a class or continuing.
Find the community, definitely. Yeah. I know, and that's what we had tried, or our focus at Sproutable was to create these videos of real families to have that experiential, moment, even when we have to be online, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. It is so fun always to be with you, and to everybody that showed up to watch, and all of you watching the replay, the first episode of Positive Discipline TV. We are so excited to continue to hold a space for these conversations each month. I also want to say on behalf of Julietta and I and Alana from Sproutable, thank you to Positive Discipline for your partnership with this project. If you are interested in signing up for next month's Positive Discipline TV, you can we'll have a new registration link at besproutable.com/PDTV, or you can sign up through positivediscipline.com/PDTV. Brad, maybe you can drop those in the chat. Next month, we're going to be talking to Dr. Tammy Kiesis. She's a PD lead trainer and the head of school at Irvine Hebrew Day School in Irvine, California. And that's going to be February 25th at 10 a.m. Pacific. So watch your inbox for more information. We're going to send out the replay. And I also want to make it really, and Jane and Julie, you guys can fill in the gaps, but there are so many resources for parents at positivediscipline.com, just endless books, and the tool cards are there. There's a blog there that Jane has written. It's just a really rich place for information. You can also go to besproutable.com. We've got online courses, membership programs, coaching available there. My podcast lives there, as well as just a huge bank of really useful videos that you can watch. Like Jane mentioned, real live kids. I love those videos. Some of which are Julietta's, which is really fun to watch. What am I forgetting, you two? What else?
Well, I just was going to say too, Jane, I mean, you showing up in this space with us, you continue to blow my mind just at your authenticity and your wealth of, information, I think, through Positive Discipline. I mean, the books alone, there's workbooks, and just your point too, Jane, if you want to grow more, teach. That to get trained as a facilitator and then create that community for yourself, create your group to say, let's learn together, it's so powerful. Yeah.
Right. Well, I just appreciate so much you guys doing it. This is really so much fun. But also I do have to say that people who are struggling, Casey, your book, Joyful Courage, where you're just so open about the challenges. I just, everybody who thinks they're struggling with, they're not perfect, you need to know you're not alone. No one is. And wouldn't it be awful? Can you imagine how awful it would be to be raised by a perfect parent? Ugh. Talk about pressure. You don't know what a gift you're giving your children to not be perfect.
That's what I keep telling them anyway. You're welcome, I say. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks again, everybody. We will see you hopefully next month. Thank you, Jane. Thanks, Jules. Thanks for the help in the chat, Brad and Alana. Have a beautiful weekend, and we'll see you all soon.
We'll see you soon. And let's do this again. Let's do another episode with Dr. Jane Nelsen, shall we?
Absolutely.
Yes, perfect.
You know what we should do is one just to answer questions.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's plenty of questions. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Real moments are learning moments.